What is good, everybody? Late night video tonight, but I just watched this video and I had to come on here and kind of do a reaction on it and share my thoughts. So, this is a YouTube video from the Rich Eisen show, I believe, and it's a former Raiders CEO, Amy Trask. Now, Amy Trask, I believe, started with the Raiders in like 1983, and she became the CEO of the Raiders in 1997. And then in 2013, about halfway through Dennis Allen's second year as the Oakland Raiders head coach, she resigned. Now, when the Saints hired Dennis Allen a couple of years ago, Amy Trask, who works in the media now, was asked about it. And in those clips, if you haven't seen them yet, I'll just sum them up for you. Basically, she said that people can grow and learn on the job, and she hopes that that is the case for Dennis Allen because she alluded to the fact that he was not a very good head coach with the Raiders, which you could obviously tell by his record of his track record there. And she said that also there were multiple team employees and players that would come to her office and basically complain about him, about the way he conducted business and about his leadership style. So, safe to say, Amy Trask is more than qualified to speak on this subject, having worked with Dennis Allen for a year or so. This is a lady that, like I said, was with the Raiders organization for a number of years, and she has been around tons and tons of different coaches and head coaches. So when I seen she was on the Rich Eisen show today and she spoke on Dennis Allen, I immediately clicked on it and it did not disappoint. Let's watch it and I'll react to it as we go.
Agreed. I watched the game, the Saints Falcons game, and watched James Winston call that audible, and he said on behalf of the entire team. And I thought to myself, in what world does a quarterback call an audible on behalf of a team? And I get that they wanted to score a touchdown for Jamal Williams, their running back. He said it was a team decision for the Saints to call this audible at the line of scrimmage in a victory formation, which of course is the universal code for we're not doing anything. And he said, well, his coach had asked him to take the knee, but they went for it. And Marshall Falk was over last night watching the Michigan game. We obviously tape this on a Tuesday. And I said to Marshall, in what world will Jameis be back? And he looked at me as like, not quite sure there is a world. And Amy, I would ask you what your reaction was. In what world does this happen to a team where a quarterback basically gives his head coach the middle finger?
In what world? When your head coach is Dennis Allen.
Wow. Coming in hot already. In what world does this happen? And she says, in the world that Dennis Allen is your head coach. So you can see Amy, she don't play around, man. She's going to tell you how she feels. So we're starting off hot. Let it continue.
Susie, I'm speaking from experience. As you know,
The best point of view to speak from is experience.
Overlapped with Dennis Allen in Oakland for 1 year. And everything I observed during that year is such that when that play happened, I wasn't the least bit surprised. Now, if it happened to any other coach, I would have been surprised.
I mean, think about that for a second. Amy Trask, who was with the Raiders organization for so long, says she was not surprised at all that it happened to a Dennis Allen team, but she would be shocked if it would happen to any other team with any other coach. Think about that for a second. All the coaches the Raiders have been through in her tenure. That's powerful, man.
It happened and Dennis was the coach. I was not the least bit surprised. Shortly after Dennis was hired by the Saints, I was asked about him, about his coaching, his leadership on CBS Sports, on that other pregame show, CBS Sports Network. And I answered in the following manner because now I have an addition to that answer. I shared my views of Dennis's leadership, and I use that word in quotes, while he was with the Raiders. And I quickly noted that, look, we can all learn on the job, we can grow on the job, we can improve on the job. I not only grew on my job, I grew up on the job.
And in those prior interviews that she's speaking on right now, she's telling the truth. She was very, very fair when she was asked about Dennis Allen when the Saints first hired him. She said, look, basically he wasn't good when the Raiders had him, but people can get better. They can grow on the job. They can learn with time on the job.
I grew up on the job. I learned. I made mistakes. And I said, Dennis can do that as well. And what that play made clear to me is he has not changed his leadership style.
Speak on it.
So was I surprised that that happened? I may have been one of the only people who was not surprised that happened.
Okay, so what do you know that we don't know?
Well, I observed him for a year. I don't know if it was 12 months, but it was obviously for a full season in Oakland. Day one, he's hired, calls a staff meeting or asks that a staff meeting be called of every single person in the organization. And everyone was so excited, and every single department, coaching, trainers, equipment, tickets. I made sure every business department was there. The auditorium was packed. And he got up and he was really rude. Not only didn't he demonstrate leadership to enthuse the staff and to excite the staff and to lead the staff, he was demeaning, he was derisive, and people walked out of that room just stunned.
Does that surprise you? It doesn't surprise me one bit. Everything that we have heard from Dennis Allen, whether it be from his time with the Raiders or the time with the Saints, just tells you he is a god awful leader of men.
Can you give some specifics? Because now I'm fascinated to know what it was that was so rude or.
You know, I'm sorry that I don't have any specific quotes. It was quite a while ago. But
Which is fair. This was in, 2012, over a decade ago.
my overall impression, and by the way, after that meeting, there was a line, and I don't mean literally a line, but people flooding into my office from the finance department and the video department and the legal department, just looking at me like, what was that? And again, I'm not here. Well, I'm here. I'm right next to you. But my point is not to belabor the past, but I gave him every benefit of the doubt that he would learn and grow from what happened in Oakland. Just like as I said, I learned on the job, I grew on the job, I made mistakes on the job. I like to believe I improved on the job. I gave him the same benefit of the doubt that he could go to New Orleans and learn from what went wrong in Oakland, where the locker room, there's that expression, he lost the locker room. I don't know that he ever had the locker room to lose it.
How can you lose the locker room when you don't even have it in the first place? Wow. Wow. So, I mean, this is just sounding so familiar because just yesterday, I believe it was, Nick Underhill of New Orleans Football came out with an article basically talking about how when the Saints were, during their stretch of games where they were losing, what was it, three in a row or whatever, people were coming to some high ranking executives' offices and complaining about it. He says that things were eroding before they started, winning a couple games here and there. So the history is literally repeating itself with Dennis Allen. The difference between his time with the Saints and him having 9 wins versus his time with the Raiders is leadership on the football team and talent. That's it.
But what I saw in that game when Jameis indicated that, yes, he knew the team was instructed to take a knee in a victory formation, but the team decided not to do that, that told me everything I needed to know.
Yeah, he was fired 4 games into his third year. What did you see in particular in that locker room?
It wasn't in the locker room. I use the word the locker room sort of in the broad sense. Players' demeanors on the sideline during practice, a lack of energy, a lack of passion. There are coaches for whom players would run through a wall. That's an old expression, but there really are coaches for whom players would run through a wall and for whom players would do anything. I saw the opposite in our team. It appeared to me, and I'm not putting words in a player's mouth, but players would do the minimum for him.
Oh my God. Players would do the minimum for him. And she's talking about how, players would just, there'd be no energy. They weren't doing a whole lot and just weren't giving it their all. And again, I bring up the report that Nick Underhill had yesterday. And in that it said that a lot of the veterans on the team felt like they were not being pushed hard enough. They felt like that the coaches were putting blame on the players rather than taking some of the responsibility for themselves.
And it's so interesting because there are so many coaches that aren't doing well, like Bill Belichick, where even this week Ezekiel Elliott comes out and says he's been the best coach I've ever had. That's 1 year after many years with the Cowboys. There are coaches that we refer to as players coaches. And it seems to me that you're unpacking maybe a history of him being the opposite.
Well, and you're absolutely right that some coaches are denominated player coaches. I don't believe you need to be a, quote, player coach, close quote, to have players respect you. You made the perfect example of Bill Belichick. You pointed that out. Nobody's going to say, oh, he's a player's coach, but players respect him and play for him. Look at D'Amico Ryan in Houston. Did you see the reaction of that team, both on the sideline, in the tunnel, and in the locker room when they clinched the division?
Just go look at any, and I'm not saying locker room speeches are the end all be all, but go look at Dennis Allen's locker room speeches after a win, and then go look at D'Amico Ryan's. Notice how the players react differently to both guys. It is just like night and day. I mean, like literally how the players react. And it's Dennis Allen literally gives the same exact speech after every time. It's just like a robot. And then what the players, how they reacted to D'Amico Ryan's, I mean, it's just such a huge difference. And again, I'm not saying, speeches are the end all be all, but it's definitely something.
Those are players and a coach who are working together, all of whom are trying to, or each or all, are trying to make the others be their best. I had the sense, and some players shared with me, that that was not what they experienced with Dennis. And again, we all grow up, we all grow. I thought he could be better in New Orleans, and I may be the only person to tell you this, but when I saw that in New Orleans, I was not the slightest bit surprised. Any other coach, I'd have been stunned.
Can you share
And again, the amount of coaches this woman has been around and probably knows still, it just says so much, man.
who the players were that were?
I would if I could remember who they were, Susie,
hear
but
ya.
it was over a decade ago.
I don't remember what I had for dinner last night.
Well, you know what? Now that you mention it, neither do I.
I don't know if I
did
I have dinner last
dinner.
night?
If they occur to me as we're talking, I won't hesitate to share with you. But I will say that I do remember some were veterans, seasoned veterans who'd played for a lot of coaches. And it was the first time in my career I'd seen that. Now, look, Al had a lot of coaches while I was with the team.
Oh my gosh.
Some of those coaches did well, some did not.
First time in her career she has had this occur to her where players come up to her, veteran players come up to her and complain about the head coach.
But I never experienced anything. Again, it's hard for me to describe that first staff meeting where every single person who worked in every single office, every department was in that auditorium. And this was a moment for him to incentivize everyone and excite everyone and build a feeling of teamwork that we're going to improve together as a team. He was dismissive of everyone. He was derisive. He was just, frankly, to use an easier word that's not multisyllabic and doesn't begin in D, he was rude.
He was a dick, is what she's trying to say.
I thought you were going to go with a different D word. That was
I
monosyllabic.
could, but I don't know if that would have to be bleeped on a podcast.
I don't know, Don. Can we go with that one? I think we'll just.
No, I
mean,
just look. There are men for whom, coaches for whom people would run through a wall. There are women for whom people would run through a wall. Nobody's running through a wall for him.
No, I think that we all
God, she's cooking him, man. She is absolutely roasting Dennis Allen right now.
can relate to that feeling of when you start something new and you go into the conference room and you're so fired up and you walk out and you think, what the hell just happened?
That's exactly, Susie, you just summed it up, and you weren't in the room, and that was exactly what happened. People were walking into my office looking at me like, what the hell just happened? And here I am trying to be a teammate and say, well, maybe he's not used to addressing a big group, but it became very clear he just was not nice.
Yeah. I can't wait to get Albert Breer's take on this because we have so many, everything we come upon in this conversation, the Texans, if we talk about any of these coaches that we're debating, Albert will have some info and help us along with this. But the fact to me that Allen hasn't been fired yet on a Tuesday, I think is remarkable. It seems to me like
So do I, Miss whatever your name is. It is truly remarkable that the Saints are going to go in year three, year 6 of Dennis Allen's coaching career with a guy who is, what is it, 24 and 46 or whatever as a head coach. One of the worst records of all time for a coach with that sample size. Clearly lost the locker room. Clearly has some kind of beef with some of the top players. Marshawn Lattimore. It wouldn't be surprised if he's out of there soon. So yeah, I'm shocked too.
He has 100% lost this locker room. And if I own this team, I don't know what the hell I'm going to do, because it leaves the season feeling, or not leaving the season quite yet, but it makes you feel like, who's running this crazy asylum?
Hmm.
Well, again, none of that surprised me. You know, in that game, New Orleans won, and they still were alive for a playoff spot. Had Seattle and Green Bay games gone differently, they'd be in the playoffs, and then this might be being evaluated differently. But again, my biggest takeaway from that play was I wasn't surprised by it, given who the head coach was.
Yeah, Saints finishing the season 9-8, his first winning season. And
So that's pretty much the gist of it. It's what we already know, right? This is years and years and years of data to prove that Dennis Allen is just not that guy in terms of being a head football coach. Because being a head football coach is so much more than schematics. We know he's a good defensive coordinator. We know he can put a dominant defense out there on the field. But it's just being a head coach is truly about just leading grown men. And Dennis Allen, from all accounts, right? And this, I'm just not some obsessed, crazy fan giving my opinion. These are people who have worked with him, okay? Like actually worked with him in the building with him that are telling you this. I mean, I don't know what more than Mickey and Gail need to see, but this is a pretty hopeless feeling knowing that we have to wait. What is it now? January, so February, March, April, May, June, July, August, 8 months until the season opener, and then another 4 months of the season. So that's over a year right there that we're gonna have to wait until our team finally moves on from this guy. Assuming they don't fire him mid-season next year. So over a year until we can finally move on into the next phase and hopefully move into more of a back into a winning culture. So that's pretty much it. Appreciate you guys watching.